Happy Friday, everybody. As many of you know, Cleanspark reported earnings yesterday. If you're interested in a video covering it, I'll leave it at the end screen. But in this video, I want to talk about an acquisition that Cleanspark made of a Bitcoin mining site. We're also going to look at Bitcoin and Cleanspark on the chart. One thing I've noticed is retail sentiment is at the worst I've seen in quite a long time. I'd probably have to look back to the spot Bitcoin ETF approval when we started seeing that little sell-off, buy the rumor, sell the news. Everyone started believing it was over. Wall Street can manipulate Bitcoin, it's never going back higher. Shortly after that, we went on to create new all-time highs before the halving even happened. And of course, many of you know lately Bitcoin has been pulling back. Typically when retail sentiment is at its worst, usually that marks the bottom, and I think this time is no different. Now before the intro becomes the whole video, let's get into this. First off, we're going to look at Cleanspark. We're going to look at this acquisition news, and then we'll give the charts a look. If you guys get something useful out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, ring the notification bell. It definitely keeps me going. Consider checking out some links down below if you're interested, and let's start. And we received news the same day as earnings that Cleanspark's going to be acquiring 75 megawatts in Wyoming for $18.75 million. And this agreement includes the potential for an additional 55 megawatts at these sites. Now this agreement is expected to close in about 45 days, and these sites are expected to add over 4 exahash per second once fully operational. And they plan to break ground on the new facilities shortly after closing. The Bitcoin miners they're going to be deploying here are going to be a combination of S21s and S21 Pros. These are the most powerful and efficient generation of Bitcoin mining machines. And these are from orders that were placed and fully funded earlier this year. Now with this potential to expand the sites by another 55 megawatts, this would bring them to 7 exahash just at their recently announced Wyoming sites here. And Zach Bradford says, just 3 short months ago, we took a leap and expanded into Mississippi. Today, I'm pleased to share that we're continuing our journey with our westward expansion into Wyoming. Diversifying our portfolio is integral to our strategy, and we're well positioned to take advantage of similar acquisitions in the wake of the halving. This is some great news, and while this won't affect the current quarter we're in, we have about a month and a half left. They'll likely just be getting those machines going at the end of this quarter. This should be reflected on our next earnings. And one thing I've been noticing that people aren't really paying attention to, most if not all, every miner I've looked at so far, forward guidance expects an unprofitable quarter in the upcoming earnings. And this was to be expected as we just got through the halving. This upcoming quarter is the first quarter that reflects the halving taking effect. And of course, we might see a drop in revenue for some. Cleanspark expects growth in revenue along with very few others. We're likely to see an unprofitable quarter. That is if Bitcoin doesn't rally over the next month and a half. We still have time, but my expectation is we will see these miners flip back to unprofitability before flipping back to profitability. Now that might initially sound bad, these companies getting back to unprofitability after making such great progress, but that's all right. If you guys have been around last cycle, you'll know that most of these miners didn't see any profitability at all. Very few posted profitability in the last cycle at the very peak. We have miners here posting profitability before Bitcoin has even really gone on its crazy run. Past halvings tell us we haven't even gone on our crazy parabolic run yet. If we don't start rallying within about 3 months, maybe this halving cycle plays out differently. Things are playing out differently already. For instance, we saw an all-time high before the halving hit, which is a first. But I chalk that up to all the buying pressure from the spot Bitcoin ETFs. And you could look at Bitcoin's all-time high coming in earlier and think maybe this cycle is going to be shorter. Maybe we're not going to rally in 2025. And while I do think this cycle might be a little shorter, I do not think the top is in. Every single last halving, Bitcoin has seen an RSI at the very least above 90. Our RSI reached about 70. Now I want to show you guys Bitcoin. These miners are not going to rally without Bitcoin cooperating. One thing I've been watching is this inverse head and shoulders. If we do break this 59.5 area, this would likely invalidate this pattern, but there is still potential we bounce here and hold up this 59.5, 60,000 area and potentially test our descending resistance here. Also, Bitcoin keeps getting rejected on the 50 MA. The Heikin-Ashi candles say the trend is continuing down for now, but keep in mind when you start seeing these shadow wicks, these large shadow wicks on the downside, typically you see a pop afterwards. We saw that this time here, this time here. We've seen it this time here. You start getting these long wicks down on these red candles and you typically can see a reversal. But for now, Heikin-Ashi says the trend is still down. Keep an eye on the RSI. I'm looking at the 4 hour here and you're seeing we're starting to try to set some higher lows on the RSI, while the price is starting to set some lower lows. Of course, it depends on where price action goes. I think worst case scenario, we're going to test our 200 MA. Ever since we broke out of the 200 MA back in October of 2023, we have not come anywhere near it. Maybe we're due to come down and give it a little test. If we keep finding resistance on our 50 MA, if we do not play out our reverse head and shoulders here, if we break this structure right here, start heading down towards 55, 54, if this level breaks, I do suspect we're going to test our 200 MA, which is currently at a potential support zone. So maybe we see a little more pain for Bitcoin. Maybe we see a little more stagnation. Typically after every halving, you do see a slow period. You do see some worry out there. You do see some negative sentiment. People start thinking, okay, maybe this halving isn't going to play out. And then right after that, it goes on to run. But currently the trend is still down. I am watching for a break out of this descending trend. It does look like Bitcoin is going to continue to follow this downtrend, potentially over the next couple of weeks. And if you have high conviction in Bitcoin and Bitcoin miners, you might welcome something like that. Really depends on the type of investor you are. If you have high conviction in something like a Cleanspark and something like a Bitcoin, fill in the blank, insert any miner. When you see your high conviction stocks dropping, do you buy or do you panic sell? Holding on to that last thought, if you do panic sell, there is no chance you would hold Cleanspark long enough to have anywhere near a 5 to 10x return. Cleanspark does not just go straight up. There are huge corrections. There are huge shakeouts. If you can't handle the shakeouts, there's no way you could hold something like this from $2 to the teens, to 20, to 25. I mean, look at these major shakeouts. We had a huge run on earnings, then we had a 50% correction. We had another huge run on earnings, then we had another 30, 40% correction. We had the market trying to price in the Bitcoin halving. We saw a huge correction there. From peak to trough, we saw about a 40% drop. If you get shaken out on every correction, there's no chance you're going to hold any stock for a 10x return. Not a chance. And to me, this is nothing but another correction. We just received our earnings. Earnings came out good. All we need is Bitcoin to run higher for these miners to rally. That's my opinion. Until Bitcoin starts running, until Bitcoin breaks its downtrend, I don't think we're going to really see these miners run. At least nothing considerable. People are still calling for the 10 to 12 gap. I still find it pretty unlikely, but you never know. If Bitcoin does come down to test that 200 MA, I would expect Cleanspark to potentially fill that gap. But barring a Bitcoin crash down to 50,000, I highly doubt we would see Cleanspark come down to 12 to 10 to fill that gap. It was a breakaway gap. It was a gap up on great earnings. It was a gap up on huge volume, the type of volume we haven't seen since last cycle. And keep in mind, guys, look at the last couple earnings. The market has reacted very positively to them, the last two good earnings. The thing is, Bitcoin was rallying during this time. Bitcoin is not rallying during this time. The market is not going to let these Bitcoin miners rally, very much at least, if Bitcoin isn't cooperating. Now, looking at Cleanspark a little closer here, I'm still watching this descending resistance. We are not breaking out of it. We're getting these false breakouts. We're not getting a candle to close out. Also, we have Cleanspark hitting the 50 MA again. This is another thing I'm watching for, a break of the 50 MA for both Bitcoin and Cleanspark. Right now, they're both finding it as resistance. Also, I've showed you guys this green trend line. I wanted to zoom back a little bit and show you guys that it has reacted to it more than one time here. I'm not just showing it to you guys because it bounced on here and the market opened on it here, but also back here, it was a resistance, it was a support, it was a resistance. The market does react to this level, this ascending line, and it last reacted to it at the end of April. I do expect we're either going to hold up on it and break out of this descending resistance, or we're going to fail it. We're going to retest our low here at this 1370 area. If that fails, maybe we have a chance to fill that gap. But right now, what we're really looking at for Cleanspark is a break of these patterns. The market has been setting these patterns up for a while, and now I think it's a matter of breaking either the upside or the downside. Bitcoin might be the deciding factor there. Looking at Mara, it's having a little bit of a worse day than Cleanspark. We are failing our trend here. I do think next would be a test of the 200 MA. Wouldn't be very surprising. This would also be a previous low that we could likely test right around the $16 area. Mara's earnings came out very good. Their EPS just killed it. They blew their EPS away. That's great. They missed their revenue. Another miner that expects an unprofitable quarter upcoming. Small growth in revenue. And funny enough, this estimate here, they missed their last revenue target. Their estimate for upcoming earnings is lower than their current estimate that they missed. If Bitcoin rallies in the next month and a half, if Bitcoin even moves up probably 10%, I do suspect this would drastically change the potential earnings results. And honestly, I'm glad that guidance was given with Bitcoin at its current price, not when Bitcoin's rallying and looking like it's going higher. I think these execs know that Bitcoin's been in a downtrend right now. They probably expect it to continue over the next month or so, which would be pretty much the rest of this quarter. So maybe they're giving us pretty tame results. Keep in mind also, that's the first quarter after the halving's taken effect. It's not surprising to see that they're not expecting huge revenue growth. This is right after the halving. Mara did try to break over its 50 MA, but it found resistance on this descending trend. Keep an eye on that. If we break out of it, we might see a reaction and then a test of this 22.5. But honestly, I'm pretty happy with the Bitcoin miner results across the board. The thing is forward guidance. Being that we're in the quarter currently where the halving has taken effect, our upcoming earnings aren't all that amazing, but considering that rewards got cut in half, I really don't think these numbers are all that bad. And consider this, even with rewards cut in half, Bitcoin doesn't really have to move much to see these miners posting profitability again. And like I said, I do expect we're going to see profitability among many of the miners by sometime in the summer, probably after this quarter gets through. But thanks as always for watching, guys. Let me know what Bitcoin miners you're keeping an eye on. Next week we have Iron, we have BTBT reporting, I think Bitfarms as well. But you know, these are the days that really test you as an investor. And I've seen it. I see it on WEBULL. I see it on the socials. Everyone is very, very bearish. Very, very bearish. And it seems every time retail is at its bearish, is at its lowest, is right when we're about to turn around. It's always darkest before dawn. Insert inspirational quote here. Thanks as always for watching, guys. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time. Enjoy your weekend.